Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
My guest today has been helping people in their journey and recovery process for the past 54 years. I feel blessed and honored today to share the set in the studio with my co-host to discuss the first in our 12 Steps in 12-Month series, Father Young.
Well, thank you very much, Dean. I appreciate being an invited guest here today and being able to share whatever kind of help I can be to the drinking and drugging community, because that's my target.
So step one, we admitted we are powerless over pretty much fill in the blank, my addiction. There's over 200 self and mutual support programs across the country and around the world now, from AA to NA. So we admitted we were powerless over fill in the blank and that our lives had become unmanageable. So Father Young, how does someone know or start to question if they are powerless over an addiction, whatever it is?
Well, it comes up with a series of bubbles that go on, whether it be his wife or the brother or sister or a community member, the codependency kind of thing that goes on, the people or the job performance, or the ACOD or the job here not being what it could or should be. It comes in by way of a bubble, a problem, a difficulty, an impediment, an obstacle to their being who they need to be by way of being a full potential person. They want to be that, but they have that barrier of addiction, that barrier of the difficulty with their intoxication or their drinking or their drugging that stops them from being all that they can be with that dignity of a paycheck.
So you speak about barriers. What are some of the barriers to people actually admitting that they're powerless and their lives are unmanageable? Because I can know, myself personally, and then also in a professional capacity, sometimes it turns into, as long as there's someone worse than
Yep.
me, maybe I'm not that bad. So what do you think some of the barriers to admitting that powerlessness are?
I often try to use a mirror, and I'll get, the barrier. I'm talking, what is the barrier? And I'll try to give them the mirror and let them look in the mirror and let them look and reflect a little bit, and then get the idea of what I'm trying, if I can, to give them as a suggestion. But, it's often, their idea is going in opposite directions. I will try to ask them and do what I can by way of intervention, but they're going in the other guy. It's always the other guy or other girl, not me, but that problem and that difficulty. If you had that difficulty, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing right now. You would do something else. It's the excuses that then prevents the opportunity of being humble enough to say, I need help. The denial is the number one barrier. Denial, 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 and I've been through that by way of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, by way of meeting and greeting and talking with them in the incarceration area, in the idea of the court, in regard to the jail, in regard to the meeting and greeting of running agencies in New York State for over 54 years.
In 54 years, you mentioned, I'm sure there's not many excuses that you haven't heard, Father, about, well, I respectively disagree with you thinking that I am powerless over this and my life has become unmanageable. How, and what are some of the excuses that you've heard in the vast array of 54 years from probably working with almost every single population of people, from the criminal justice to, all walks of life? We both know addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic background you come from, how much money you have in a bank account, if you're driving a Bentley or taking the bus. What are some of the excuses that you've heard, the ones that stand out the most and are most common for people to have to overcome to even get on to the second step?
Well, I think it's important to talk about how they feel about themselves, and they're always looking at, maybe that would be another person, but it wouldn't be me, Father. When I'll confront them with a few of the realities of what they have as life and the problems that they've been speaking of, and then try to point them in a direction of hope, experience, and that kind of a better kind of life, it's that they often will deny that they have a problem. It's always the other environment that causes the problem, or those that are now not drinking, they don't know how to relax and they don't know how to enjoy life. My idea was, break that barrier down. How do you find an opportunity of intervention? It could be tough love. It could be an ACOD. It could be a court case. It could be a mother. It could be an EAP provider. It could be a variety of things that will say, here's the problem, let's face it. And that facing it, and it's easier when you're working with a person who has a prestigious job. And I've been doing an awful lot of the kind of work in the Assembly and the Senate and with many other major players and many of the state bureaucrats. And when I say, if I'm going and I'm talking with a political leader, I'll say, well, the party or the people sent me here to tell you that if you don't do something, they're going to fund your primary opponent. Well, then you get the cooperation. That's sort of a high bracket. You don't find many people walking away because they look at what they have of the home, they look at the family, they look at the assets of what they've accumulated, and then they know their job is at stake. So they're saying, well, maybe you're right, Father, maybe I do need help. You have to have some way to break that barrier of that denial that they're throwing in your face. If you get that barrier out of the way, then you're home free.
I can remember in particular in a hospital-based detox, a Marine came into the facility and was seeking, with the assistance and encouragement from a loved one at that time, detox services, and it was opiates, and it was hydrocodones. And the concept for certain populations to not be able to grasp the fact that they could be, for example, powerless in something so small as a pill could make their lives become unmanageable.
Yep.
So again, I think it's tough, and there's 12 steps, but like you said, denial's the biggest barrier, and we can't get to 2, 3, 4 through 12 until we get through the first step. Can we be powerless and our lives not be unmanageable? Let's talk about the concept of the functional alcoholic or addict, or when people believe that they themselves are, or a loved one. Well, he still goes to work, he still gets a paycheck, the car hasn't been repossessed yet. Can someone be powerless over in addiction and their lives not become unmanageable.
Yeah, we do a group. I do a group frequently on that. With the idea, I use the idea of the car as an example, and the guy coming in back into our group saying, I want to repossess the car. And that starts the conversation. Now, the wife being a codependent person and the idea affected by this kind of take back of the car, you know, the kind of way that she would be either an enabler for good or for bad. And that enabling, again, is very important. But I go back into the idea, the first step we have to do to try to break that is to try to get the person where they need to be. Medically might be the first step, maybe through detox. Now, working in the idea of the court every day, I was assigned in '59 as court chaplain and jail chaplain, and I went up there every day, and I went up to court, and there were two members of the fellowship that came to me and they said, Father, how about taking advantage we want to give you a treat. How about a trip to Ohio? We'll give you the airplane fare. Two members, John D and FG, came up to me and said, we'd like, if we could, to provide you money for an airplane ticket. And we'll have someone meet you out there and then give you an idea of what we can do, because you're working with a homeless shelter. You've got hundreds of people on the floor every night. You're taking care of the homeless. But in those populations, you get all the people that are drinking, and we're running, if we can, try to help you and assist you. They met with me every day, and I'd get the lineup up there, and they would, in the jail, in the court case, and they would give them to me after they were released. And I didn't know what I was doing. And the two members of the fellowship said, here's a little helping hand. Why don't you go out and learn a little more about this opportunity, what they have, a program out there in Ohio that you would be interested in. I went out there and I took off and I went there and I was met by Bill Wilson and the crew. And then in meeting, and then he brought me over to Sister Ignatia in Charity Hospital, Rosary Hall, and I met with her and she said, here's what you're to do and learn how to do it. We're going to have people coming in that have experienced strength and hope and are willing to assist because they've been successful in their recovery, and now they're coming in and they're going to be meeting and greeting these people in the ward. Now, you're only to be a matchmaker. Here's a background on the people that I know are willing to help to do the matchmaking and give experience to them about where they've been and what they've done to gain recovery. So you set the match up. All you are to do is to try to be the person, to get that person to sit down, have them call, and we're going to give you a free lunch and all that. Just have them say, here's what we'd like. I'd like, if I could, to invite you over to talk with me, to give me ideas of how I can help my recovery. He's in the bed, he's in the room that needs the kind of care, and this person has it. So you've got to be the matchmaker to take the person who has recovery to give it to the person who needs recovery.
Sure.
So I was merely a matchmaker, but I learned a lot working there at that hospital, Rosary Hall Charity Hospital, and trying, if I could, to help them identify, because then they would agree to take the person out to a meeting and be a sponsor. Now, it's not really that way now, but it was at that time when I was out there. And then at the end of the kind of time, Sister would say, well, now here's an idea of what you've done, and I want you to keep this, but if you decide to drink, you bring it back and give it to me, because I don't want you to drink with this. And bring it back before you drink and tell me why you want to drink. And so people would feel that was a guilt trip, and they would come in saying, oh my God, I have to return this to Sister before I go out to drink. Smart move by Sister.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. If someone admits they are powerless and their life has become unmanageable, the first step, then they relapse. Did they truly internalize that they are powerless and their life had become unmanageable?
Well, that's a major kind of thing, because many don't, but many do. And you know, you find out those who will be able to go back on the right track. My problem is, I feel it's a disease, I feel it's an illness.
Absolutely.
And if you get caught with the idea of going back in, and it might be something that you have as a diabetic condition, a cancer, or some other kind of thing, sometimes you don't really follow all the instructions and you're not taking the right kind of medication, you're going back in for the care. I think it's the same thing. You need more, maybe extended care, maybe you missed something, maybe you didn't take the right step at that right time. So I feel it could be something that could be, again, reinforced by the therapy team in a relapse prevention program.
So if someone relapses, doesn't necessarily mean that they haven't grasped the concept that they're powerless. It just means that they are still an addict.
Yeah. Dick Caron, down in the idea of the first Caron Foundation House, he was a very close friend of mine. He wanted me to start a program in '59. Dick Caron was a great advocate of that, and he had a big sign in his when you would come in, going out, you would not forget picking up. If you pick up the first drink, you will feel guilt of that first drink. And that's the kind of thing. He reminded people that they should not drink. And he reminded them, if you do, come back. So Dick Caron he was my master in that kind of work that I did in the early days, in the 50s and the 60s. He was a guy and he and Marty Mann and people of that type, I worked closely with to develop a network of care in New York State.
Powerlessness, it's subject to individuality, because what I may find in my concept of my life becoming unmanageable and myself being powerless over something, is powerlessness subject to the individual? Is that a matter of perception?
To me, perception is the negativity of people about who they are and what they feel they are. When we had, the idea of, you had mentioned the word destigmatize, I felt the legislation that we promoted for 35,000 meetings and 14 years of my life to change the law, the perception and the idea of who they thought they were was, I'm not worthy to do anything about it. I'm just caught, I'm a drunk, I'm a bum. And I heard that again and again and again and again in the kind of many types of legislative efforts I made. I was defeated every time because they didn't feel that they were really sick. They felt that they were a criminal. The destigmatization comes in when we destigmatized by the decriminalization. They opened up a door and they were no longer powerless. They were able to do something about their disease.
And that makes them empowered.
And then they were empowered to make it a win instead of a loss.
What are some questions that you ask people when you meet them and have met them over the past 54 years in regards to, you mentioned initially that first point of intervention to try to assist someone on that path of admitting they're powerless and their life has become unmanageable? What are some questions that people can ask themselves, or what are some questions that you ask people that you've found have assisted in the process of people internalizing and grasping that first step, even if it's just for a brief moment, that mustard seed of hope that, okay, maybe there's a different way. I'm powerless over this. My life is unmanageable. I want to change.
Well, I think a very important thing that I've tried to do and use as the example, it's a power of attraction. That's the idea of what, not promotion, but attraction. If you can attract a person by your recovery, people want to be a winner. People want to get the help.
Always hear that. Stick with the winners.
Stick with the winners is on there, and when you go to a meeting room, you'll find it there pretty much all the time. It's stick with the winners, but it's attraction. I always try to look at the people who we invite in to assist and to be an attraction. That's why I'm happy to be here today, because the attraction is your own. You and others who have done good things for good people, and therefore you got to get rid of that image that they're bad people. They're bad people. They're not bad people. When we first decriminalized and had that destigmatization that went with it, before that in the fellowship, you would go to the rooms and would not see women. Very rare. There were very limited numbers of women that attended those meetings. When we decriminalized, the doors opened and women came in, as we have now in large numbers. Before that, it was a man's kind of problem and a man's kind of concern and a man's kind of an identity, and it'd be rare to see women walk in the rooms in the 50s and the 60s, and it now, thank God, is the open door.
What are some of the other things that come to mind when we talk about the first step, being powerless and our lives becoming unmanageable for you? You mentioned, for years you wouldn't find women in the rooms. Is there a disparity between the concept of powerless and lives becoming unmanageable between men and women?
I don't think it's that. I think it's the idea of the image that people have of what the disease has been. It's been a crime, 24040 in the Penal Code. Now it's an opportunity of an illness. Now they're going into the new DSMs, and that's the diagnostic kind of thing the state and the feds give us, and they say they're talking about now maybe being a failure, a disorder, a psychotic disorder. I'm saying it's an illness. It's the idea of the drink When you take it into your system, certain people, about 27, 28%, I feel, are predisposed to be addicted. And with that addiction, they have a higher level of dopamine. With that higher level of dopamine, you take it and you put it in your system, and you get that endorphin rush, and the endorphin rush goes to the neurotransmitters, and then it goes to the pleasure center of the brain, and that brain will remember the joy that you had that might be different than anyone else. Other people will get excited and they'll say, boy, that was great, I'm going to do that again. We're predisposed and we're predispositioned to have a problem that we don't know about it unless we can get the I over the E, the intellect over the emotions, and then get our body under control, our mind under control, and say, if I do that, I'm going to be running into a trouble kind of thing, and I don't want to do that stupid stuff. I want to do the intelligent stuff, and sticking with the necessary PPTs, the support groups that I need to have that'll help me keep it together and be a winner. I keep going back again to the example that people can give with their experience, strength, and hope that will attract them who are needing help.
In 54 years, Father Young, not to put you on the spot,
No.
have you ever met someone that you believe is not capable of getting recovery?
Yes, well, plenty. Because when you get to the cage of Korsakoff syndrome, you don't have culpability. I often look at culpability, and when I meet with anyone and anything, and if you know me, you'll know I try to find out, do they have a third tradition? Do they have a sincere desire to stop using? And then I try to find out how many resources will they need to try to back where they need to be. But you have to have that third decision. You have to want to get into recovery, not just need recovery.
None of the steps are going to work if you don't have that desire to stop
the
using.
third tradition is so important, and you have to have that sincere desire to want to get better. And they all do, but you have to hit the right spark at the right time. And that's why I use positive example. I try to get the winner to meet the person who needs the help, and then put that match together. And then in that kind of way, that person inspires the other to become a good person.
Thank you for discussing step one. I want to switch it up a little bit and talk about you and the programs that you've been doing for 54 years. I'm familiar with the concept of the three-legged stool.
Okay.
In some of the services that your program offers, perhaps if someone's watching for themselves or someone that they may know, care about, family member, brother, sister, co-worker, what are some of the services that you folks offer in the concept and the mission behind, for example, the three-legged stool?
Sure. Happy to talk. We're scattered around the state, so we have been working with a lot of the three populations, the homeless, the addicted, and the criminal justice folk who have the commonality of being in any way affected by alcohol or drugs. So we try to work with that limited kind of group, and we try to then provide what we feel that they need. So I always talk about admit, accept, and surrender, to try to get them where they'll cooperate with us, because we try to show them that you can be that kind of success. And we talk about people who've been there and done that, and now they're back where they need to be, and they're happy, and they're getting the dignity of a paycheck. That's important to have. So we have to try to, if we can, to train people so that they can get the skills needed for a job. We have many vocational programs. And we're right now a little over 5,000 people a day.
Wow.
With over 500 employees. And so we're scattered around the state with that kind of an opportunity for recovery. But it's the idea of getting people into a position where they can get that kind of stabilization. How do you do that? By housing. You have to get them in there where you can provide housing. So we have many housing opportunities, whether it be halfway houses, supportive houses, certified houses, uncertified houses. We have a lot of uncertified houses because NIMBY will often be in the way of providing care. We feel that you have to keep that door open and keep the opportunity extending into where they can go in an inexpensive, affordable opportunity of safe, free from alcohol and drugs. So getting them into that kind of need would be the priority to me. But you have to get them in treatment first. So you have to get them to admit, accept, and surrender to their disease. And you were talking about the idea of the first step. And you're powerless over that disease. If you continue that disease, you're going the wrong way. We want you to go the right way and get the foundation, the stability of being on a three-legged stool where you can have treatment, housing, and employment. And that's our key. We try to go beyond the idea of treatment. We try to get the stabilization so you can keep it. Just don't get it and then lose it. Maintain it and then get that kind of job that you can, so you can be responsible and help other people.
The concept of 12-step programs has been around since 1938, the first
Yes,
fellowship that
sure.
utilized it. You mentioned
Bob and Bill.
Bob and Bill. Since 1938, we've seen a lot of things come and go, different trends. What do you think it is about the 12 steps that has had the sustainability for decades now?
Well, it offers the stability and growth. When you look at a lot of the other opportunities, I'm talking about maybe medications that are coming in now that are saying we can do it, it's less expensive, we can do it. But do you have that sustainable kind of example? Do you have that kind of growth and that kind of stability I keep returning to? You get that by way of getting people in the fellowship so they can extend themselves so that they can be a helping hand to other people. And that's what I've been talking about forever, it seems. And I'm just talking about that again and again, and I repeat myself. I'm apologetic, but not apologetic, because I feel you have to, again, prove that. We did the radio shows up here at WGY for many, many years at the time when I was a controversial kind of guy saying it's not a, don't incarcerate, rehabilitate, don't incarcerate, rehabilitate. And after, then with Bill Edwardson on WGY, and I got all these conversations, and then we would meet on Monday morning, give our telephone number out, and we would use that kind of conversation at night to stimulate the thinking. If you need help, call us. We would have all of the members of the fellowship with us participating on the idea of receiving calls and having chances to then go out and respond to that kind of a need that they did through our council and through our efforts of a community networking program.
Father Young, I'm familiar with some of the advocacy work that you've done at the legislature and,
Right.
and most recently testifying at the Capitol. What is the future of recovery, and what are we missing in the last few minutes of this episode? What's the future of recovery?
I feel we're losing the war. I mean, I've been in a war with the idea of where it's been for these many, many years that you've mentioned. And I've always been thinking optimistically. I'm not now, and I hate to say that. We're getting more funding, more programs and other things, but we're losing the idea of the people being involved to make and give back. The people are saying, I've been there and done that, now I'm taking care of myself. And sometimes that selfishness is not what we need now. We need to have the people that are able to take and carry the person to a meeting until they grab onto the idea of recovery. We're seemingly losing that. Back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, I could find many people who would quickly volunteer to do the networking and being a sponsor and then continue. And I really commend them and I praise them, because that's what I did for many years. I'd call up and I'd say, I need this guy to take a drive to take him to recovery. I need him here, I need him there. It was a beautiful kind of a relationship with the fellowship, and I enjoyed so much of that. And I think we're losing that enthusiasm and the excitement of being in recovery.
In one sentence, if someone's watching or knows someone that's still sick and suffering, in one sentence, what advice would you give to them?
Don't drink, don't drug, and go to meetings.
Father Young, thank you.
Sound advice. Peace be with you.
Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.